This episode is proudly sponsored by Indigenous Business Australia, who serves, partners and invests with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who want to own their own future. Welcome to the Black Magic Woman podcast with Mundanara Bales.
I'd like to begin this podcast by acknowledging the Kabi Kabi and Gabi Gabi peoples here on the Sunshine Coast in beautiful Queensland. I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present and acknowledge that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. We have never ceded our sovereignty as First Nations peoples living in this country now known as Australia. And as we know, the acknowledgement of country is an ancient diplomatic protocol that's been practiced by Aboriginal people right across this country for tens of thousands of years. So when you're acknowledging country, as a non-Indigenous Australian, see it as an invitation to participate in the oldest living continuous culture in world history. Now, if that's not a step in the right direction, then what is? When we've got all of these organisations and corporations and institutions and everyday Australians doing an acknowledgement of country. And I always say, well, what's next? When you're acknowledging country, well, that's great. And you're paying respects to elders, that's beautiful. Do you know the country? Have you met the elders? So there's a lot that we can be doing now that we've got the acknowledgement right, but we still have a long way to go in terms of understanding the importance of acknowledgement of country. So as a visitor here, living on Kabi Kabi Gabi Gabi country, I was following proper protocol by acknowledging country. So in terms of this style of podcasts, there's a title for it. It's a vodcast, the first ever vodcast here on the Black Magic Woman podcast. This is episode 9 of the IBA partnership series, and it's absolutely amazing to know that we can now have people zoom in, our first guest on Zoom, zoom in and actually see us as we interact and engage with each other. So as always, it's probably a better way of introducing yourself when the guest shares who they are and where they come from. So I'm going to hand over to my guest, James Morgan from Yibekka Kakadu. Braz, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Can you tell us a little bit about, who you are, who your mob is, where you grew up?
Yeah, so it's good to be here. Thanks for having me. I was born in Darwin and Larrakia country, but my family come from both Daly River region on my father's side and Kakadu area on my mother's side. And yeah, over my life I've grown up and lived in many different places, Perth and Canberra, but now I'm back here, currently working and sitting around Jabiru on the lands of the Mirror clan, and who also are, family for me as well. So yeah, I'm very lucky and happy to be here.
Thank you. So James, take us back to your early days. So tell us, where was you born? Do you have a big family? Your mum and your dad, are they still around? So take us a little bit back when you were a little fella.
Yeah, so when I was quite young, living in Darwin with my mum and my dad. My parents separated when I was quite young, and because of that separation and the mental health challenges that were going on with my father, who developed schizophrenia at the time. It was kind of, at the time you don't really kind of realise it, but it had a big effect on where and how I grew up. So me and my mum, we moved down to Perth, where she could get away from all that and feel a bit safer. And yeah, she and I grew up together down there, pretty far away from family, but we were our own family, just me and her most of the time. And grew up there, and she, was a single mum. She went to uni as well, and some pretty amazing things. My little brother was born at that time as well. And so he's 9 years younger than me. So, yeah, grew up around Perth, love that place. That's where I kind of got my first love in AFL, and remember going to...
I thought you was going to talk about your first love in terms of a woman.
not that young. Fremantle Dockers.
Alrighty,
was
my your first love.
You could kind of say. But hopping on the train every second week down to watch them play their home game at Subiaco Oval. That's didn't really have much ambition or dreams of the future. I just kind of went through life, going with the flow, just kind of scooting by school, not really doing too well, not doing too badly. Yeah, just kind of living life as a kid. You don't really think too much about the larger things in life. But we ended up moving to Canberra. It's where my mum got her opportunities in the public service, and I continued to get a lot of different experience in schools. I think over that time between kindergarten and year 12, it was about 7 or 8 different schools I went to. So there was a lot of moving around from school to school. There was a bit of a stint where we moved back up to Darwin, but yeah, most of my senior schooling was done down in Canberra. Public schools, private schools, you name it. Times where, the schooling was really lax and laid back. You didn't have to worry about a uniform, and kids just run amok at lunchtime. And then, spending year 11 and 12 at private schools where you had to, have your tie and blazer and all that kind of stuff.
And socks pulled up.
Yep, up to the knees. That's right. So I got kind of pretty well used to just blending in to wherever I went to, and not really standing out too much as I could, even though lots of the times I was
the only black fella or what?
Aboriginal kid in this classroom, which is what it is. But I looking back now, I kind of see just how much of a great opportunity I had back then, and how lucky I was to kind of get that different type of schooling education, especially, coming back to Kakadu. There's only one school here. After I finished year 12, I was kind of in Canberra. My mum had moved off to Kununurra with my little brother at the time, so I kind of started living on my own and working when I was 18, fresh out of school. I got a really good opportunity in the public service, and really ever since then I've kind of stayed in the public service, the Australian public service, and it kind of just really made me think a lot about what I'm doing and what I should be doing to help others when you're in that world.
So did you end up going to university when you left school?
No.
Okay.
No, I
straight
finished
into
year
the
12
workforce.
I originally thought about going to university, but I think, it's good to share. In year 11 and 12, I really struggled at that time. I had ebbs and flows. At the beginning of the year 11, I had like a projected ATAR, I think, of somewhere around the mid 85s, which, depending on which state and territory, it might not mean anything.
I have no idea.
I don't know what Queensland is.
I have no idea either. But I finished
by
year
the
12.
end of year 12.
Yeah, by the end of year 12.
Yeah, exactly. And by the end of it, I finished year 12, but my ATAR level just dropped because, I was not handing in assignments. I was, just really kind of got into a really dark place mentally as well, just feeling like you're inadequate, and once one little thing happens, it just spirals out of control. And so, just got the best of me. And by the end of it, I was just happy that I even finished. And I wasn't particularly interested in continuing that kind of education.
12 years was enough. 12 years was enough.
Yeah, that's right. And in that time, I got my first job during school, working at Red Rooster, and just doing odd little jobs here and there, working at supermarkets and things like that. And for me, I just found it a lot easier, and I think I just succeeded a lot better in a working environment than a school environment. It certainly helps that, everything you do means something. I never really liked the fact that in school, when you did your assignments and essays, you handed it in and then nothing really happened. It was just to be judged, and, that's it.
Well, the education system in this country doesn't really benefit non-Indigenous kids at the best of times, and our kids, get caught up in the system where they're navigating these two worlds. You're growing up in an Aboriginal world, for those that, did grow up with their Aboriginal family and community and culture. Like a lot of us, I just think about one generation back, like my mum was a ward of the state. She was institutionalised under government policy in New South Wales. So on my mum's side, we go back five generations of forcible removals. So I'm the first generation that wasn't taken by the state, that had that privilege to grow up with my own family and my siblings. I've got 8 sisters. I don't have any brothers. But growing up in Redfern, it's an Aboriginal community with lots of black fellas. It's one stop from Central Station. And it's not like a mission or a reserve like in other parts of the countries. In other parts of the country, the missions that were set up were on the outskirts of town. And reserves, like here in Queensland, you've got Palm Island, Yarrabah, you've got Cherbourg. They're really big places where 50 different tribes were all, rounded up and placed on those, or dumped on those reserves. So just growing up in that Aboriginal world, and then, navigating the Western world when you go to school for the first time. And it's so different. And I don't think many people really understand that in terms of the Aboriginal culture, it's a group-based society, whereas the Western culture is a highly individualistic society. It's all about the individual, I, me. Whereas in the Aboriginal world, it's all about us and we. Like, you don't put yourself outside of your group. So there's so many things I think that's wrong with the Western world, especially with the education system. But the pressure on us as black fellas to participate in both worlds, right? If we don't participate in the Western world, we're going to get left behind. So trying to navigate those two worlds. And then even when you think about, being on the receiving end of racism and discrimination, the amount of trauma, of sorry business, of people dying, the amount of grieving, and just the impacts of intergenerational, or the impacts of colonialism and the impacts of past government policies that have led to now intergenerational trauma. So when you started talking about feeling, not good in terms of your mental health, I was just starting to think, in Canberra, for people that don't know where Canberra is, it's, a lot of black fellas there as well, but it is, what would you say, Canberra is the kind of, meeting spot for all of the politicians and parliamentarians. That's where, all the politics play out. Servants. Yeah. But it's not really, for me, in terms of, doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in Canberra, Brisbane, Sydney or Perth, because we are a minority, we make up 3% of the population, you don't really see us out there in these different spaces like private schools and universities. So it can be a daunting experience and you can feel quite isolated. when you're not in your community, or you have to leave community for schooling, or live off country or work off country. So now that you're back on country, can you tell us a little bit about your business, Yibekka Kakadu? It sounds amazing and looks amazing, but it's just so interesting that, you've started growing up in Darwin, then you went to Perth, lived in Canberra, and now where are you right now? Tell us a little bit about the backdrop. I know it's not a virtual backdrop, it looks like one. The country that you're on right now.
Yeah, no, it's no green screen. Yeah, it's kind of monsoon season. Most people would call it wet season, but here in Kakadu we've got 6 different seasons, and usually around that kind of big monsoon season, that's our Gudjak season. So when those big rains come and all this spear grass begins to really grow tall and long, and everything starts to turn green, the waterfalls start to flow, and from a tourism perspective, it's really, really quiet. But for me, I think it's one of the better times. All the floodplains, all the rivers start to fill up, and it's just a pretty amazing time of the year. It's actually the amount of water that comes here is one of the reasons why this place is so special, and so much life just flourishes around this space. It's what makes it really special, I think, and for many reasons, it's many other reasons, because it's so hot and all the flies and things like that. Many tourists don't get to see that, but that's all right. It's a good time to reset and prepare each year for the tourist season.
So where exactly is Kakadu National Parks?
So it's about 2.5 hours east of Darwin. Kakadu's the largest mainland national park in Australia. It's a little over a little under 20,000 square kilometres. So just sheer, it's massive, and it's actually takes you an hour to get from the edge of Kakadu all the way in to the town of Jabiru, which is where the towns most people live, and where I usually work on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. So for listeners that don't know about Kakadu, it's definitely on my bucket list to come to. But who are the people there? Like, what's the name of the traditional owners? Like, tell us a little bit more, so we can educate our listeners.
Yeah, so because Kakadu is so big, there's actually multiple different traditional owner and clan groups that we have in the park. We've got Bininj people in the north, and there's several different clans there. Mirror people are around Jabiru. My family further south, Jock, towards the centre and Yellow Waters area, which is also my grandmother's country, Murrumbul country. And then the further south you go, you actually go into Jarwin country, which is also the traditional owners for kind of Nipmaluk and Katherine region. It's quite a large area that they cover as well. So the Kakadu's got many different owners, many different people, many different groups at times. There's different language groups. So when you think of Kakadu, don't think of just one group of people, because that would be grossly oversimplifying, and I think where some people kind of have a lot of misconceptions about as well. So what brought you back? What brought you back to Kakadu? Well, what brought me back, I think, was just, like I kind of got sick and tired of the education system after year 12. I also kind of had that same feeling after working some time in the public service, and just being so far away and disconnected from family and country. So since I was 18 to about 22, 22, 23. There was about 4 or 5 years there where I was just kind of living on my own. And yeah, I would have to say I was pretty isolated, and work was just all I worried about, all I did. Went home on the weekend and, yeah, didn't do much else except for going to the library or, whatever else was going on. I don't drink or anything like that, so I didn't go out. I didn't have many friends. Yeah, just really kind of work was my life. And there's a point there when you kind of get to a stage where work isn't really working out for you. So that kind of, you then feel like your whole world's falling apart. So I'd been in that stage before, and I knew that that wasn't a very healthy place to be. So I kind of I already kind of made the decision that I had to leave Canberra. And I think the best thing for me at that time was just to come back here to Kakadu, reconnect to this place and family and everything like that, because like lots of people, and you're talking about your family and that kind of disconnect. My grandparents were taken from their country as well. So my grandmother, who's my connection to Kakadu, she was born here. She was in her early teens, or not too sure exactly how old, but she could speak language. She grew up here, born here. She was the daughter of a jock woman and the daughter of a white kind of buffalo hunter here. And yeah, when obviously the government came in, and at the time there was that assimilation policy, and she was taken from this place and moved to Redder-Dixon in Darwin, quite an infamous institution now that is well known for a lot of bad reasons. But yeah, she was essentially forced to stop speaking her language and interacting with her family. And it wasn't until she was much older that she kind of came back and re-established that connection, but she never really lived back here. She's lived most of her life away from this country now, and so I wanted to come back here so I can, start to learn more and live here, learn the language, and just feel reconnected and looking after myself.
It does something that it's kind of inexplainable when you go back to country. Mm-hmm. Like when I go back to my dad's river, like his ashes are in that river, and it's the Dawson River, which is the Gungaloo people in central Queensland. And I didn't understand as a young person why he took us from Redfern, from the city, and drove us to Theodore. It was like 20 hours drive. Every single year he would take us and drive back to his river, to his country. And obviously we camped and, well, there was I don't think we had money for a motel. But I guess I didn't really appreciate, I think that's what I'm looking for. I didn't appreciate what he was doing and didn't really understand why he always wanted to go back there, because there was nothing there. Well, nothing to the naked eye, but it was everything to him. Like his childhood memories were there. His grandmother and grandfather raised him and his siblings on the banks of that river. He learnt to swim in that river. They caught their lungfish, yellow belly in that river. So all of those memories, must have come flooding back for him every time he used to take us there. And now I've taken my kids there 2 times, and we haven't camped, stayed in a motel. My kids, they're city kids. But I actually, when I get there, I take my shoes off, and there's this kind of big sigh where you're kind of like, this is my home, like this is my country. And it's like the country kind of speaks to you. And it's a feeling that I don't think many non-Indigenous people will ever feel, in terms of that deep connection to country, whether you've lived away for a long time or you didn't grow up there. But there's this feeling when you go back to country. What was it like when you first came back, living in the big city in Canberra and then coming back home? What was it like?
Yeah, well, it was just getting back was quite an experience in itself. I had a little Toyota Starlet, which is just a little hatchback, and I either got rid of, sold, or just threw out whatever belongings that I couldn't fit in that little car, and drove all the way from Canberra, but I took a bit of a detour. Stopped off first in Sydney, but then went to Mildura and then up to Broken Hill and then down to Adelaide and then, up all the way up the Stewart Highway there. And along the way I stopped in and tried to experience a lot of the local Aboriginal tours or tourism experiences. And there wasn't a lot. And I wish I remembered the name of it, but just north of Broken Hill, there was this little national park where there was this one bloke who took us around and he kind of shared very similar stories, that upbringing and just having, the government at the time interfere with their families down there but also trying to look after their country and their culture today. And I remember he kind of pulled me aside because he knew I told him a bit about why I was, going through and going back home. And he gave me this special plan in Emu Bush, I think, and he told me that this would kind of help protect me and for my journey on the way. And at the time, I shouldn't have been driving at night time, and it was a little car. It didn't have a bull bar, and I look back now and I think it's pretty amazing that I didn't, hit anything or have some kind of accident. But I think, just having that in the car the whole time was a great experience. But finally when I did get back up to Kakadu, I ended up first having to live with my uncle, Jeffrey Lee, who I can talk about a bit more, but he... all we did was kind of go down to the local Billabong, Umbung Billabong, with my auntie as well at the time, and we just kind of sat down and we didn't even really talk. We just sat down and watched the birds and watched the sunset, and just sitting there, instantly, you just felt like you're at home. You didn't have to, question yourself or your place. You just feel like you can just be.
Just be who you are.
In the moment. Yeah.
No pressure to be anything but yourself. And no pressure to even talk. Exactly. Like you said, there was this silence. And a lot of, we say migloos here for white fellas. What did you say? What do you say, Bullanda? Or what do you
Bullanda, yeah. So
we say migloos or gabars. And it's not offensive for, non-Indigenous people listening or watching. When we're saying migloos, migloo is also the name of the white whale that travels up the coast of Queensland. That's I think the only white whale. And they gave him the name migloo. So it just means ghostly features, like white looking or pale. So in terms of, with a lot of non-Indigenous people, sitting in silence with mob would be, hugely uncomfortable. To sit in silence. Whereas a lot of, I would say, white fellas feel the need to fill that silence with chatter or small talk. But with black fellas, you can sit together and sit in silence for a long amount of time. And occasionally you might say something, right? But it's not uncomfortable. Like it's people can sit with that silence. And it takes me back to this moment where my grandmother's brother, Uncle Ross Watson, who passed a couple of years ago, he was actually really unwell. And I turned up to my grandmother's sister's house, who I'm in business with, and I was sitting there, and as my uncle was literally taking his last breaths in the room, he was very unwell. I went in the room and I said I didn't say my goodbyes, because as we know, if we don't see each other again in this lifetime, we'll see each other in the next. So I just sat on that bed with him and we're having a yarn. And when I went outside, I sat with my aunt and I said to her, and in our language, sister of grandmother is Bibina, and my aunt Lila is my Bibina in our Birigaba language. And I guess I started to feel really uncomfortable in this silence, knowing that someone was actually passing away in the room next to us, right? So as I was sitting there and I was like I started to feel a bit anxious or uncomfortable, I pulled out this little business card and I said, Aunt, I'm going to quit my job soon and I'm going to go into business. And she said, oh, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to do cultural awareness training because the organisation I'm working for really needs it. So I'm thinking of resigning and then going back to them with a solution to the problem, right? Here I am usually telling a lot of non-Indigenous people about, when you're sitting with mob and there's this silence, to not feel the need to talk, to be able to, just sit and be comfortable with silence. But there was that moment, or I can tell you now, where I wasn't comfortable at all, sitting in that silence for so many hours. It must have been 2-3 hours, and very rarely was anyone talking. And then I started talking about this idea of mine, and I never imagined in a million years that I would go into business with my elders. Never in a million years. And so Black Card was born. So I'm in tourism as well. We've got Black Card Cultural Tours where we do walking tours around Brisbane, and we activate public Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander art around Brisbane. So we don't talk about culture in terms of country because we're not traditional owners. We use Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander art as a draw card, to talk about the art, talk about the story, or even talk about the artist and their life. So I'm really curious to hear about your tours or the business that you've set up, and I know that you've had some support with the IBA Accelerator program. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved or even how this all started?
Well, if you want to, I've got some notes here because I actually, it's kind of, I guess, part of that IBA journey. You get to record a lot of that stuff. And at the time, you feels like, you're going really slow. And I've always, and my uncle tells me all the time, to just slow down. And
you've been in the city too long, see? It is. It's fast-paced, eh?
It's 100%. It is 100% because of influence. And he would always tell me yelich, which is the word for just slow, steady here. When it can be just like when I'm talking about ideas and things I want to do, but also, just in the car, he's always just slow, steady. And, the more time you spend here, the more you kind of learn to fit in with that kind of way of life. And, I certainly appreciate more and more as time goes on, just how important that is to just be slow and steady. And, often, whenever you're rushing around, whether you're packing to go on a road trip or on a holiday, if you're running around frantically in a rush, that's when you forget things. That's where you make a mistake. And if you're just slow, steady, even if it takes longer than it should, that's how you know the job's being done properly. And that's kind of a very big mindset that I'm having to really kind of readjust to. And I think, certainly better off for it. But going back to your specific question on where it all kind of started, I've got some dates here that kind of, when it comes to the business idea, you never really think about starting your own business. I had no one in my direct family that had started their own business. I was quite lucky in the fact that my grandmother, she had a a really good education. My mum went to university, and but when it comes to business, I never really even thought about it. I actually joining the public service, just being in Canberra, but also, you know, following in the steps of my grandmother and mum. It's just so easy to follow those, what you know best. But back in February 2018, on the 9th of Feb, I, you know, happened to come across this email saying that there was this Canberra Indigenous Entrepreneur Centre lunch going on. And Dion DeVal was the one running that, and you know, he's now become like Canberran of the Year, and you know, continues to run his own businesses, and is actually a close family friend of my mum. And yeah, he was kind of that first kind of introduction to what it meant to be a Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. He is person in business, and at the time I probably didn't. It wasn't that moment that I was decided, I'm going to be a business person, but it kind of, looking back now, it definitely planted the seeds. And then it wasn't for another year later, on the 12th of February 2019, that I actually signed up to do an IBA one-day course called the Business Starter Workshop. Yeah, that was kind of where I first started to really get the tools, like the business model canvas, just a one-pager thing where you get to actually put your any idea you have and start to fill out all the different fields that you need to think about in order to start a business. And even at that stage, you know, I hadn't committed to doing a business. It was all just testing that idea. I feel like I've always been quite a risk-adverse and cautious person. And, you know, public service is a great, secure job, and it doesn't come easy to just start to think and jump into business because there's so many risks with it. But
so did you actually go to the Futures Forum? Was you there on Warramai Country?
I was, yeah. That was a month later, on the 25th of March, 2019.
Because I was on the panel.
Were you there?
Yeah.
There you go.
Do you remember the business panel of all the different black fellas on that panel?
Yeah, it was. Was that the same one as Bruce Pascoe?
Yes. He was the main speaker.
Yeah.
All right.
There was so many people.
I know. There was at least 50.
I apologise, but I'm glad, because you probably don't remember me either.
I'll be honest with you. We didn't connect. But I do remember, agreed, you know, a few, out of about 50, I was actually walking around in the room watching you fellas doing those activities with not Clinton, what was his name?
Oh, I can't remember.
Yeah, the facilitator. Wasn't he unbelievable? Like, he was just, in terms of like really big picture thinking and planning of what, you know, what does your community look like in the next 50 years? Or what do you want to see with your business in the next 50 years? That was pretty inspirational, spending a week there with your mob.
Yeah, where those kind of really artistic maps of what a kind of business, what his concept of a business plan was. I'm not going to lie, it was probably a little too high level for me. It was too.
I'll tell you what, I was actually in my head thinking, thank God I'm one of the facilitators and not a participant. Because as I was walking around the room and looking at you fellas, I was like, man, this is pretty full on. It was, wasn't it? Just high level.
Yeah, I take things in a very different approach, and everyone's got their own styles. I'm more nuts and bolts, pragmatic, step-by-step approach. Yeah. So that kind of stuff, while I kind of understood it, I just thought,
very high level.
I don't want to.
It was.
Very high level. And I've told him that himself, and, you know, what he does is amazing and excellent, but it's definitely not for everyone. And definitely not for, communities who, business.
Needs to bring it back, just scale it back a bit. Yeah.
I think so.
Don't worry, Braz.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. And for the ones that did get a lot out of it and were able to take that plan back and implement it and execute it, well, deadly. For those that even just being there, those connections and those networks with other mob, right? I think for me that was invaluable.
And what it does, and what I didn't realise at the time, just attending that first workshop led to that Futures Forum, which led to
put you on the radar.
The Accelerator program. Yeah, definitely. IBA, they definitely knew who I was, and they wanted to really kind of support me. And looking back now, you definitely don't realise it, but looking back, you take those opportunities and they lead to other opportunities that you don't even realise or know exist. So that, I think, was the big kind of takeaway for me. Relationships, 100%. Networking with people. I think that Futures Forum was a very, very important step in that business and my personal journey, I think. And Warramai country and what they're doing down there was something where it really cemented what I wanted to see here in Kakadu, a corporation who was really in touch with their own community. And that Andrew Smith, who I think may still be the CEO, I had like a one-on-one conversation with him because I missed out on the dune buggies.
I missed out on them too. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to go back one day, definitely.
Yep.
But at the time, I was on some ACT government boards, so that's the reason why. But after I got off that meeting, I just had a chat with Andrew, and just that kind of one-on-one conversations you really remember. And what I think is the most important about business is that kind of you seeing, and you referenced it in your business, you see a problem and you're then able to fix it. And when he talked about, the really terrible stories of, somebody in that community, a young kid passing away because they didn't know how to swim. So what they did was decide to build their own swimming pool in the back there and start offering these swimming lessons to their community members and also the broader community. And that example is something I still, when was that? That was 3 years ago. I still remember that like it was yesterday, because it was that self-determination through economic empowerment. They didn't have to ask anyone for the money to build that pool. They didn't have to ask anyone for anything. They just did it because in large part they had the money. And that economic empowerment, just having that control, just unlocks so many other things that you can do, and so many issues that you can solve yourself. And I think even just bringing it back to the simple idea of just being a kid, you don't have much control over things. But as soon as you're an adult, as soon as you have control over your own finances and start having a job and start using your money, that's when you start to have real control over your life. And I think, the more that we as, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people can control that kind of stuff, we can use it to then look after things that we want. It can be used to look after country, to look after culture, to help our people, to live healthier, stronger lives, in whatever way. I mean, that was the main kind of outcome from that workshop, and it just kind of kept the momentum going from there.
Are you now running a business, or you are about to launch a business? So tell us about Yibekka Kakadu, the rock art tours.
Yeah, so it's been a long journey, and it wasn't until last year.
Let us know.
Yeah.
They've been good all this time. They've been good all this time.
I know. Yeah, well, usually they've been pretty good. When it's the middle of the day and it's really hot, sometimes they just don't shut up. They'll just make noises all day. But sometimes you got to be careful, because if you're out, like, fishing or camping, and then all of a sudden one just arcs up and starts squawking really loudly, some of my family start looking out for whatever made that thing jump up and, like, alert.
Yeah.
And sometimes it could be a buffalo. So, yeah, you definitely pay attention to that kind of stuff now. So whenever I see, when it's a group of them, it's all right. But if there's just like one of them that just starts going off for whatever you might think is no reason,
there usually is a reason.
Buffalo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're letting you know.
There's always a reason. There's always a reason for why.
Yep.
Taking notice of that. And here, when the spear grass is pretty tall, big buffalo, they're pretty, for such massive creatures, they're pretty quiet. And my family are more scared of buffalo than crocodiles any day of the week, because buffalo can be anywhere. Buffalo, they can sneak up on you anywhere. Crocodiles, they're in that water.
Are they actually aggressive, the buffalo? Are they aggressive?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they can be real aggressive.
Wow.
There's been times where photographers have been impaled trying to take photos of them.
I feel like I'm there with you. I literally feel like I'm there with you. And
well, it'll make for a memorable episode if a buffalo pops out.
I'm not joking. I'm watching your back, brother. I'm looking behind you in that long grass, and I'm just trying to just watch and keep my eye on that long grass for you if I could see anything.
Oh yeah, when you're out working, like with the park, you always look for the nearest tree you can climb up. But my car's right in front of me, so I can. You're good. Yeah.
I have never felt this tense doing a podcast. I literally am sitting on the edge of my seat. I don't know if you've been watching my eyes, but as you're looking around, you're watching, you're looking, and I'm just kind of staring and waiting for something to happen, because I have no idea where you are. I just know that you're out there in Kakadu National Park somewhere.
You don't need to go very far. Like, I'm just on this. We've got a green dump here where people just chuck, their like branches and any kind of clippings from the trees, whatever. Even trees that have been cut down. There's a green waste place. So this is just like a service road back there, but I just wanted to get away from the main roads so that, you can also actually see what this country looks like this time of the year.
It's beautiful. You could have been just sitting at home and we could have been seeing you at the kitchen table or sitting at a desk. It is absolutely beautiful.
Well, that's usually where I sit down with the computer, and this is
a treat. Better. So thank you for going out of your way, even with, maybe buffalo going to join you.
Yep. Yeah.
So in terms of the rock art, are you far from? Give our listeners like a bit more of an idea of where you are right now. Are you far from the rock art that's in the national park? Or do you have to get in the car and drive a day or a couple of hours?
Yeah, well, Kakadu is pretty special. There is over 5,000 recorded rock art sites here, but there's only a handful of different public sites which people can visit. The main art gallery, which I generally give tours, which is on my uncle's, and it's kind of like a shared clan area as well. It's called Barungoy, previously known as Nalangi rock art, and it's about half an hour's drive south of Jabiru where I'm sitting now, and so you just travel down the road. It's pretty accessible, nice and easy. It's open all year round. There's other sites which you can generally access only in the dry season, where you can see other rock art sites as well. But yeah, that's basically, you don't have to go very far. and you see some pretty incredible rock art sites, some shelters which have been our people have been, living in for thousands of years. There's been excavations and archaeological studies into that specific site, and over 20,000 years is where we have hard evidence of occupation. But for that specific site where you get to walk, so like when people talk about as well 65,000 years of at least Aboriginal people living here, that actually also comes from within a Kakadu site shelter just north of Jabiru, which isn't open. When you walk around this place, no matter where you are, you know that you're in an ancient country, and you just at night time you get to really feel that how long people have been here for. And when you think about it, it's pretty hard to imagine, the changes in the sea level, the ice ages and things that have happened over that time. And, there has been changes as well in how this place has looked. But, that people have always lived here, and at times it can be hard, but it's what makes this place even more amazing, I think. But when I think about, all those people just walking through those shelters, you get a sense of it. But also I get that sense of, all the people that have lived here over that time. When you're driving at night time and there's bushfires going on, so not long after, in the next couple of months, so around May, Yege time in our season, when all this spear grass dries up, those winds come through and knock them down and flatten them. After that time, we start burning. And that's how we've always managed this country as well. And yeah, one of the other special things that my uncle, shared with me one night as we were driving through, and at night time it gets really cool, and so some of the fires go out, but sometimes there's logs and things that will burn all through the night, and you see like little glimpses of them as you're driving through. And one night, and he's only said this one time in the whole time that I've been here, but he said when I was driving through, when you see those little log fires off in the distance from the road, he thinks of all the old spirits and ancestors sitting around that fire at night time, because they've never left this place. They're still here. And when you walk through those places, you walk through those places with those spirits. And yeah, you feel that when you're walking through those shelters, but you also feel that at other times too. And at night time, when you see those logs burning in the distance, that's their campfires.
How special.
Yeah.
To see it that way, where, you wouldn't think that otherwise, right? You just think there's a log burning, not thinking my ancestors are sitting around that fire and doing what they have been doing, since the first sunrise in this country. In terms of culture, right, because you're living on your country and you're, in terms of cultural tourism, it's a business that you're getting off the ground. How important is culture in terms of with your business? It's a tourism business, and I would say culture is at the heart of your tourism business where you are. But just for other people to understand, how important culture is in your business.
Yeah, well, for me, I think it's kind of embedded in any decision I make. Even the idea of doing the business in the first place is something that, I don't make on my own. I've got to talk to my family and the traditional owners in my family and kind of get their endorsement and support and make sure that's something that they think is an acceptable thing to do. And I'm lucky enough to have that kind of support. And then, when it comes to talking about those stories of those places, those stories aren't just owned by myself. Those are owned by the whole family, by other clan groups as well that have got that connection. And so at each step of the way, I have to be conscious and aware and make sure that everyone is aware of everything that I'm even thinking about doing. Because this kind of stuff isn't really, it's not mine. It's kind of everyone's collectively. And even as something as simple as, you know, choosing a name, you have to make sure you don't choose a name that is, you know, a specific animal or something that belongs to a certain clan group. Things like that you got to be really conscious of. So when I picked my business name, it was something that was really a descriptive word, Yibekka Kakadu. Yibekka means to listen or feel something, and then Yibekka Kakadu means to listen and feel Kakadu. And so it's also about when people do come and visit, it's not just them taking photos, it's not just them putting it on Instagram and saying, oh yeah, these are all the numbers, these are, you know, how it's done. But it's actually giving them a chance to feel that place, because so many people come to Kakadu 1, 2, 3 days and they just rush through and see as much as they can. And you know, you listen to some of how old people now who've been instrumental in the establishment of the park, old people like Big Bill Naji, Toby Gangali, and the Nyingals, Jacob Nyingal. When they talked about this place and opening it up to the public and signing those lease agreements, it's so that people could come here and so that Bininj people could share that culture. And I think as well, it's important that that culture is shared by those Bininj people. And for Kakadu, despite being a massive tourism industry within the park, there is not many Bininj businesses and even fewer Bininj tour guides, people that talk to tourists and share that culture. And for me, the first step was just learning how to be a tour guide in the first place. It's not something that I generally was a natural at. It's not something that I would say I fit into the general model. There's many different ways of being a tour guide or a presenter. What I wanted to see in the meantime, or through this business as well, is hiring more people and getting more people involved in this tourism game, because one, it unlocks that economic empowerment and determination that I was talking about earlier, but also it's about sharing that culture with other people, which is why Kakadu is a national park, why it's open to the public. And I think it can help facilitate a lot of other challenges that are present in this place when it comes to housing, employment, other health, education as well.
And just those opportunities, James, for not just the younger mob, but just the community, having employment opportunities, working for, you know, a Bininj business, working with black fellas, working for mob, working in your community, working on country. A lot of our young people, you know, sometimes we lose them, you know, they go off to the big cities and go to school, and some come home, some don't. Or we're losing to, you know, other organisations. It could be mining companies. But to actually have Aboriginal businesses that employ Aboriginal people, you know, for me, that is self-determination, that we determine our own futures, right? And our young people get to see that, and hopefully that inspires them and empowers them, that if you're running your business and, you know, you started off doing another job, and like you said, you're not the general mould for a tour guide, but that's the beauty of our culture. That I think all of us as black fellas are so passionate about our culture and so passionate about sharing our culture with the rest of the world. And this podcast is even about that. I want people to know that we come from all walks of life, we come in all shapes, colours and sizes, and we've all got different experiences as well. But, you know, we, as much as hopefully, you know, that we're succeeding and contributing to society and participating in society, but there's also a lot of challenges that come with that, and like I always talk about work-life balance. But yeah, I just thought in terms of those younger people, it's so important that they see that it's possible for them, that the opportunities are endless for our mob. You know, we make up 1%. The Indigenous business sector is 1% of businesses in this country. But when I think about IBA in terms of the support in the Accelerator program, getting businesses like yours to market, is there any other professional development that they offer? Because it's, you know, it's all well and good to have a business and to launch it, but then that extra support and professional development to continue that journey, especially around, you know, growing your business, marketing your business. So have they been supportive in any of those aspects?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I think after that Accelerator program, which itself was really great, just in terms of shaping the way you tried to solve problems and even the way you thought about the problem in the first place, and different ways that you can solve things was really invaluable. I think the only bit of feedback, and I think I gave it at the time, was just when you do those programs or those courses or those forums, it's just to give you a general information and resources that you could use. You very much have to go away yourself and really think about how that applies to your own business. And you also have to do a lot of problem solving yourself. So IBA also, I should also mention, they've been really great with helping me get a loan for my tour vehicle. So I got a IBA grant loan through them, which is a service that they have, and I was able to purchase a Land Cruiser, a four-wheel drive to carry passengers around. So it's $55,000 secondhand. Yeah, there's this IBA grant loan where they cover 30% as a grant and 70% as a loan. So that's been really great, and I've been using that not quite to carry passengers, but to actually meet people in certain places, which is primarily because my business has had to evolve because of COVID and all the shutdowns. And, you know, originally I wanted to start in 2020, but then, of course, with all the COVID stuff, it locked down. And then in 2021, I thought maybe we'll be able to jump in and do tours again. But then, you know, more COVID and different variants came through. And so now this year, I'm more confident, hopefully, that goes
Fingers
through.
Crossed, it's happening. It's going. You're launching. You're getting out there. So how can people contact you? Yeah, how can people contact you? Like, what's the best way for our listeners if they want to come to Kakadu and experience Yibekka?
I've got a website, so yibekka.com.au, yibekka.com.au. This morning at 7:30, actually, it's been a long day. I've had my work day, but from 7:30 in the morning, I've been having meetings about trying to get my booking system live on that website so that people can easily book straight away and pay for tickets. It will be $45 for an hour and a half tour around that site. And hopefully by the time this comes out, they'll all be live and up and running, so people can visit there if they're wanting to come and visit Kakadu.
Too deadly. Well, look, on that note, I just want to say thank you so much for, you know, I told you don't go over an hour, but I could sit and listen to you all day in terms of just talking about your beautiful country and the fact that you get to share your culture, with the rest of the world. And I can't wait to experience it myself and bring my kids up there. So look, James, thank you so much. Really, really amazing. It was a feeling of just feeling really relaxed and then feeling on edge with those birds going off, thinking there was buffalo coming. But look, thank you so much. And yeah, look, hopefully, fingers crossed now, we've got the borders open and tourism and business will be back to some kind of normal. So on that note, thanks for being part of this episode.
Thank you. And hopefully we'll see you in Kakadu soon.
I'll be emailing you now.
Go for it.
Oh, good. Thank you. Have a good night.
See you later.
Too deadly. What an amazing first vodcast. To actually be talking, looking at yous and you looking at us, and to have our first guest sitting in Kakadu National Park, and the backdrop, which I actually thought was fake at first when I saw the grass starting to move. I could just picture myself there in that moment. And listeners, you don't have to guess where we are because you can now watch the Black Magic Woman podcast. So I'm just really pumped that this is the first episode of doing the video and also having this part of the IBA partnership series. So hopefully the next couple of episodes we can keep doing these video casts so that you can see us and hear us and interact and engage with us. Maybe we'll do some live podcasts, maybe on Instagram or something, maybe a YouTube channel. Who knows? The sky's the limit, right? Well, let's get back to the deadly brother James. I just can't believe he's gone from Canberra, packed up his bags, jumped in his little car and drove all the way back home. And, I guess he's very lucky in terms of being able to be in that position to just pack up his bag and to go home. In terms of cultural tourism and supporting Indigenous cultural tourism, it's really important in so many respects, especially knowing that an Indigenous business is 100 times more likely to employ an Indigenous person. So you can make a direct contribution to our communities when you invest in Indigenous businesses. In terms of tourism, you can do some homework, do some research. There are more and more Indigenous people, launching their tourism businesses all around this country. And Yibekka Kakadu is one of those new businesses that I'm pretty sure is going to, blow up really quickly. It's really unfortunate that COVID has interrupted with a lot of our Indigenous businesses and new businesses that are trying to launch. So please, if you can support more Indigenous businesses, we make up 1% of all Australian businesses. There are 2 million businesses in Australia and the Indigenous business sector makes up 1%. And then when you think about 100% Aboriginal owned and even female led Aboriginal businesses, it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So I hope you enjoyed the yarn, that you actually got to see us and not just listen to us. So until next time, bye for now.
If you'd like to know more about IBA and how they can help you to own your own home, start or grow a business, or invest in your future, visit iba.gov.au or free call 1800 107 107. Don't forget to follow Black Magic Woman podcast on all social media platforms. To keep up to date with the latest episodes and news, head to blackmagicwoman.com.au. You can rate and review the podcast on iTunes, and please feel free to share the podcast with your family and friends.